The chamber hummed with the low thrum of holographic displays, their blue glow casting long shadows across the vaulted ceilings of the Galactic Concorde's central hall. Ambassador Ilara Voss, human representative from the Sol Alliance, stood at her podium, fingers clenched around the edge as she scanned the assembled delegates. To her left sat Crix, the avian diplomat from the Zorith Collective, his feathers ruffled in clear impatience. Across the aisle, Thaler, the hulking reptilian envoy from the Draken Dominion, drummed his claws idly, golden eyes half-lidded in boredom. At the head, presiding over it all, was High Arbiter Lyrina of the Etherians, ethereal, silver-skinned, and utterly convinced of her species' unchallenged wisdom. Ilara cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the knot twisting in her stomach. The anomaly in Sector 7 is growing. Our probes show its destabilizing quantum fields across 3 systems. If we don't act now, it could unravel entire trade routes, billions of lives at stake. Lyrina's tendrils waved dismissively, the Etherian equivalent of a sigh. Your enthusiasm is noted, Ambassador Voss. But the Concorde has protocols. This anomaly is a mere fluctuation, as our simulations confirm. Humanity's penchant for alarmism is endearing but unwarranted. Crix chirped sharply, his beak clicking. The Zorith agree. Our flocks have scouted the edges, it's contained. Why divert resources when the Veil Nebula offers richer yields? Thaler grunted, his tail flicking. Draken engineers could seal it in a cycle if needed. But why bother? Let the void take what it wants. Ilara's jaw tightened. She'd seen the data herself, raw feeds from human outposts flickering with interference, ships vanishing into rifts that spat them back as twisted wreckage. Her team back on Earth had run the numbers. Exponential growth, not fluctuation. But arguing here felt like shouting into a stellar wind. With respect, Arbiter, our models predict cascade failure within months. We need a joint task force, shared tech, shared risks. Lyrina's eyes shimmered with synthetic patience. The Council will deliberate. Your proposal is tabled for the next cycle. The holographic gavel struck, and the session dissolved into murmurs and rustling robes. As delegates filed out, Ilara lingered, her breath fogging the podium's edge. Crix paused beside her, tilting his head. You humans push too hard, Voss. The stars don't bend to grit alone. She met his gaze, forcing a wry smile. Maybe not. But they break if you ignore them. Thaler lumbered past without a word, but she caught the flicker in his eyes, curiosity perhaps, or doubt. Lyrina swept away last, her form dissolving into a shimmer of light, leaving Ilara alone with the dying hum of the hall. Back in her quarters aboard the station, Ilara patched into the secure line to Earth. Captain Reyes' face materialized on the screen, his salt and pepper beard framing a grim expression. They're stonewalling again? He asked, leaning forward. Worse. Dismissing it outright. She paced the narrow space, the bulkhead's cold metal grounding her. Reyes was her anchor, veteran of the Mars reclamation, cautious where she was bold, but always with that quiet resolve that made their partnership work. We can't wait for approval. If we deploy the Odyssey unilaterally. He nodded slowly. Risky. Concorde could slap us with sanctions, cut off our helium-3 imports. But if that thing breaches the Oort cloud. His voice trailed off, the unspoken weight hanging between them. Ilara stopped, staring at the starfield beyond the viewport. A faint distortion rippled at the edge, Sector 7's shadow creeping closer. Then we adapt. Like always. Rhea's eyes hardened. Prep the team. I'll rally the engineers. But Voss, make sure it's clever, not reckless. She signed off, her mind already racing through schematics. The Council had chosen comfort, arrogance cloaking their fear of the unknown. Humanity? They'd choose the stars, one defiant step at a time. But as the first alert pinged, an outpost gone silent, Ilara wondered if steps would be enough. The dim glow of the habitat module's emergency lights cast long shadows across the cramped control room. Alex wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers leaving a streak of grease on his skin. The air recyclers hummed unevenly, struggling against the rising heat from the failing fusion core. Lena hunched over the diagnostic console, her wiry frame tense as she jabbed at the flickering holographic display. Core's at 60% integrity, she muttered, her voice steady but edged with frustration. That micrometeoroid shower we hit en route punched right through the shielding. If we don't reroute power soon, we'll be drifting dead in the void. Alex leaned against the bulkhead, his broad shoulders sagging under the weight of command. He'd always been the one to push forward, brave to a fault, or so Lena teased him, but this mission felt like punching through a brick wall with bare knuckles. The Council's rejection still burned. Humanity lacks the maturity for Ascension protocols, the alien envoy had intoned, their multifaceted eyes gleaming with smug certainty. Arrogance pure and simple. Now here they were, light years from Sol, testing their own path with a jury-rigged arc ship that was already coming apart. We can't afford to lose momentum, Alex said, crossing to the viewport. Stars wheeled lazily outside, indifferent to their plight. The Ascension drive, their clunky human-built prototype, was supposed to fold space itself, propelling them to the next evolutionary rung. But, without a stable core, it was just a fancy paperweight. Options. Lena didn't look up, her fingers flying across the controls. Quick-witted as ever, she was the glue holding their two-person crew together. We vent the auxiliary coolant lines into the core chamber. It'll buy us time, maybe stabilize for a jump. But it'll freeze the hydroponics base solid. No fresh oxygen after that, we'll be on tanks for the duration. He nodded, the decision settling like lead in his gut. The ship, the Odyssey, carried more than just them. Frozen embryos, seed vaults, the fragile seeds of a new human dawn. Sacrificing the gardens meant gambling everything on this one shot. But turning back? That was surrender to the Council's verdict. Do it, he said. And patch me through to the comms array. If Zor is still listening, we might need that alien insight after all. As Lena initiated the purge, a sharp hiss echoed through the vents, ice crystals blooming like frost on a winter window. The core's whine steadied, but Alex felt the chill seep into his bones. The free trader Zor had been their unlikely contact. A sly, tentacled vexary with a penchant for human idioms and a hidden grudge against the Council. He'd slipped them schematics before they launched, whispering of backdoor Ascension rights the elites hoarded. But trust was a luxury out here. The comms crackled to life. Odyssey, this is Shadow Drift. You primitives stirring up trouble again? Zor's voice slithered through, laced with amusement. Alex gripped the microphone. Trouble found us, Zor. Core breach. We're pushing the drive anyway. You in or out? A pause, longer than the lightspeed lag should allow. Then, in. But Council's patrols are sniffing your trail. They'll call this heresy. Meet me at the nebula's edge, coordinates incoming. And Alex? Don't ascend without me. I hate missing the show. The link cut, leaving the hum of the ship and the faint crackle of forming ice. Lena straightened, rubbing her arms against the dropping temperature. Think he's playing us? Alex met her gaze, the stars reflecting determination in his eyes. Only one way to find out. Strap in, we're jumping blind. The drive thrummed to life, a deep vibration that rattled loose panels. Space warped around them, the viewport blurring into streaks of light. For a heartbeat, triumph surged, human grit defying the odds. Then alarms blared. The core flickered, the jump stuttering as secondary systems overloaded. They emerged not at the nebula but in a debris field, hulking wrecks of ancient vessels drifting like forgotten ghosts. Damn it, Lena breathed, scanning the readouts. Partial fold. We're off course and the core's down to 20%. Those wrecks, Council relics, maybe traps. Alex unstrapped, adrenaline sharpening his focus. The cost was mounting, air dwindling, ship limping, and now potential hostiles closing in. But retreat wasn't in their blood. Suit up. We salvage what we can. Humanity's ascension starts with scavenging, not speeches. As they cycled the airlock, the first sensor ping echoed, a shadow detaching from the debris, vexary markings glinting under distant starlight. Zor or something worse. The void held its breath. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that the Endeavor was running on borrowed time. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the holographic display. Red warnings blinked like angry eyes. Oxygen reserves at 32%, structural integrity holding at 78% after that last micrometeoroid hit. Her crew, 12 souls handpicked for this first contact mission, huddled in the bridge, faces etched with the strain of 3 days adrift in the void. "Any luck with the comms array, Jax?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She didn't look at her chief engineer. Instead, she watched the starfield outside, where the Council's blockade loomed like a wall of indifferent steel. The alien fleet had cut them off after the summit, dismissing humanity's plea for alliance as primitive posturing. Arrogance, pure and simple. Now here they were, stranded on the edge of the neutral zone. Jax Rivera wiped sweat from his brow, his wiry frame hunched over a jury-rigged console. Tools cluttered the floor around him, sparks occasionally flying as he coaxed life from fried circuits. "It's a mess, Cap. The pulse from their shutdown weapon fried half the relays. I can patch a signal, but it'll be weak. Might not punch through their interference." From the navigation station, Lieutenant Kira Voss leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing at her own readouts. The youngest on board at 28, Kira's caution had saved them twice already. Once by spotting that debris field early. "If we boost power from the thrusters, we could angle for the outer relay buoy. It's a long shot, but it might relay our distress to the colony on Epsilon Eridani." Elena nodded, weighing the risk. Thrusters meant burning fuel they couldn't spare, and with the Council ships patrolling, any maneuver could draw fire. But sitting idle wasn't an option. The air scrubbers were failing and hallucinations had already started creeping in for the lower decks. "Do it. Jax, reroute what you can. Kira, plot the course, keep us dark until the last second." Jax grunted, his hands moving with the practiced grit of someone who'd grown up fixing scrap in the orbital yards. "On it. But if this backfires, we're venting Atmo faster than a popped hull." The bridge fell into focused silence, broken only by the clatter of Jax's tools and the soft beeps of consoles. Elena's mind raced back to the Council chamber on Nexus Prime, where the alien delegates, those towering iridescent-skinned Vexari and the cold, calculating Centauri, had laughed off Earth's overtures. "Your species lacks the quantum entanglement drives," the Vexari elder had sneered. "Ascension requires more than grit." Humanity's response? A defiant launch of the Endeavor, loaded with prototypes born from late nights and sheer ingenuity. Now that defiance was testing them. A sudden jolt rocked the ship, alarms wailing as the holographic display flared with incoming signatures. "Contact!" Kira shouted, her voice cracking the tension. 3 Council interceptors, sleek and predatory, closing from the blockade's flank. They'd been spotted. "Evade pattern Delta," Elena ordered, snapping into action. The Endeavor groaned as lateral thrusters fired, twisting away from the pursuers. Jax slammed a panel shut just in time, his signal bursting out in a desperate Morse-like code. "Human vessel in distress. Request immediate aid. Coordinates attached." But the interceptors were faster, their weapons charging with an ominous whine over the external sensors. A beam lanced out, grazing the hull, sparks erupted from a nearby bulkhead, and the lights flickered. Oxygen warning escalated to 28%. "They're locking on," Kira said, fingers flying across her controls. "We can't outrun them." Elena's jaw set. No speeches, no panic, just choice. "Jax, divert emergency power to shields." Kira, hail them. "Tell the Council their primitives aren't done yet." As the message went out, the first interceptor fired again, the impact shuddering through the ship like a hammer blow. Alarms screamed, but in that chaos Jax's eyes met Elena's, a silent pact forged in the fire of survival. They weren't ascending on the Council's terms. They'd carve their own path, one desperate fix at a time. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the Odyssey's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with data streams from the sensor array, painting a grim picture of the nebula ahead, a swirling maelstrom of ionized gas and rogue plasma bursts that had claimed more than one exploratory vessel. Her crew, a tight-knit trio of veterans, watched her expectantly. Beside her, Navigator Kai Ren leaned forward, his fingers dancing over the holographic controls, while Engineer Mira Torres paced the bridge, her toolkit clinking softly. "We push through," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The Council's directive had been clear: chart this unclaimed sector or forfeit humanity's claim to the adjacent system. Arrogant xeno-diplomats had dismissed human tech as primitive, betting on their own fleets to map it first. But Ilara's team wasn't about to let pride or politics ground them. Kai nodded, plotting a serpentine course that wove between the densest plasma flares. It's risky, Cap. One wrong vector and we're ionized toast. But if we skirt the outer rim, we might shave off an hour. Mira snorted, halting her pacing to jab a finger at the screen. Hour? Try minutes before the shielding buckles. I've patched the emitters twice already. Third time's not the charm if we hit a surge. Her caution was her hallmark, born from too many close calls on frontier runs, but it grated on Ilara today. They needed speed, not second-guessing. The ship lurched as they entered the nebulous fringe, colors bleeding across the hull like watercolor on wet paper, a single vivid streak of violet plasma licking the forward shields. Alarms blared softly, warning of fluctuating energy fields. Ilara's mind raced through contingencies. Reroute power from life support if it came to that. Humanity's edge wasn't firepower, it was adaptation, the grit to improvise when the stars turned hostile. Steady as she goes, Ilara ordered, eyes locked on the tactical overlay. Kai adjusted thrust, the Odyssey banking sharply to avoid a blooming arc of superheated gas. Tension thickened the air, broken only by the occasional ping of incoming data. Mira dropped into her station, fingers flying to reinforce the grid. Shields at 80%. Holding, for now. Deeper in, the nebula's heart pulsed with erratic fury. A massive plasma tendril whipped toward them, forcing Kai to execute an emergency dive. The ship groaned, inertial dampeners straining as G-forces pressed the crew into their seats. Ilara tasted blood from biting her lip. Real stakes, no simulations. If they failed here, the Council would laugh, sealing humanity's isolation in a galaxy that viewed them as upstarts. Got a window? Kai shouted, spotting a brief calm in the chaos. He punched the coordinates, and the Odyssey surged forward, emerging into a clearer pocket. Cheers erupted, short-lived as Myra's console sparked. Overload in the auxiliary core. We're venting plasma. Seal it or we lose propulsion. Ilara unstrapped, moving to help. No time for hierarchy. This was raw teamwork, human resilience distilled. Together, they wrestled the access panel open, sparks flying like angry fireflies. Myra's hands, steady despite the sweat beading on her brow, isolated the breach while Ilara rerouted coolant lines on the fly, a jury-rig born of necessity. The ship stabilized, but the cost lingered, a faint tremor in the engines, a reminder that the nebula had taken its toll. As they pressed on toward the system's edge, Ilara glanced at her crew, their faces etched with determination. The Council's arrogance had forced this gamble, but humanity's choice was clear: ascend through sheer will, 1 kilometer at a time. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console edge as the shuttle shuddered through the nebula's fringe, violet gases swirling like angry spirits outside the viewport. Her crew, 3 humans, all that remained of the Ascendance Away team, huddled in the dim cabin, faces lit by the flickering emergency lights. Marcus, the engineer with his perpetual grease-streaked brow, muttered curses at the failing engines. Beside him Lena, the xenobiologist, scanned readouts on her cracked tablet, her cautious eyes narrowing. And then there was Jax, the pilot, his witty grin faded into grim determination as he wrestled the controls. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before the core overloads," Marcus said, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. He yanked open a panel, sparks flying as he bypassed a fried circuit. The shuttle lurched, throwing Lena against her harness. She bit back a yelp, clutching her tablet like a lifeline. Ilara nodded, her brave resolve masking the knot in her gut. The Council's fleet had blockaded the outer rim, their arrogance blinding them to the ancient artifact they'd unearthed on Zorith Prime. A relic pulsing with Ascension energy, the key to humanity's leap beyond the stars. But the Council, those self-proclaimed galactic arbiters, saw it as a threat, a human toy to be confiscated. Their interceptors had swarmed, forcing the team into this desperate evasion through the Whispering Veil, a nebula known for shredding shields. "Jax, can you thread us through the densest part?" By Marcus time? Elara asked, leaning over his shoulder. The nebula's electromagnetic storms could mask their signature, but one wrong turn meant disintegration. Jax's fingers danced across the yoke. Threading? More like dancing with death. Hold on. The shuttle banked sharply, engines whining as it plunged into a thicker cloud. Alarms blared, hull integrity dropping. Lena's scans beeped urgently. Captain, there's a pattern in the interference. It's not random. Like echoes of the artifact's signature. Elara's mind raced. The artifact had bonded with their ship back on Zorith, infusing systems with its power, but it was volatile, untested. If they could sync the shuttle's core to the nebula's rhythms? Marcus, reroute the artifact's auxiliary feed to the stabilizers. Let's ride the waves instead of fighting them. He paused, wrench in hand, cautious doubt flickering in his eyes. That could fry the whole grid. Or worse, amplify the overload. Better than waiting for the Council's guns? Jax shot back, voice edged with tension as another jolt rocked them. The viewport filled with crackling plasma, a single bolt of it illuminating a massive, shadowy form ahead, an abandoned mining rig half buried in the gas. Lena's tablet chimed. The echoes are strongest there. If we dock, we might siphon power to stabilize. The plan formed in fragments, born of necessity. Elara unstrapped, grabbing a toolkit. Jax, get us close. Marcus, prep the artifact link. Lena, map the rig's integrity, we can't afford a collapse. As the shuttle hurtled toward the rig, its skeletal arms looming like forgotten bones, the first interceptor pinged their sensors. The Council's hunters closing in. Jax hooped a forced laugh. Company's here. Time to improvise. Marcus sealed the panel, the artifact's hum vibrating through the deck. Link active. Responding. Like it's alive. The shuttle grazed the rig's docking arm, clamps firing with a metallic screech. They spilled out into the derelict corridor, zero-G boots magnetizing to the grated floor. Dust motes floated in the stale air, lit by their helmet beams. Elara led, pulse rifle ready, the weight of the artifact's portable core slung over her shoulder. A glowing orb the size of a fist, thrumming with untapped potential. Scans show the power plant's intact but unstable, Lena whispered over comms, her voice cautious as she floated ahead, sampling the air. Breathable but laced with residual radiation. We move fast. Jax sealed the hatch behind them, his wit surfacing in the strain. Fast? In this floating junkyard? Feels like home. They pushed through twisted bulkheads, the nebula's glow filtering through cracked viewports, casting eerie shadows. Marcus trailed, monitoring the core's output. It's syncing with the rig's old grid. Power levels rising, 30%, 40%. A tremor shook the structure, alarms wailing from dormant systems. Elara froze as a holographic log flickered to life on a nearby console, an ancient miner's face distorted. Evacuation protocol engaged. Nebula breach imminent. Council's embargo forced our hand. The words hung, a ghost of past defiance. Humanity had always pushed boundaries, but the Council's grip tightened with every discovery. This rig, abandoned decades ago, whispered of similar betrayals. Captain, interceptors inbound, 2 minutes, Jax reported, eyes on his wrist display. They reached the power plant, a cavernous chamber dominated by a massive, dormant reactor. Lena interfaced her tablet, cautious fingers flying. I can hotwire it, but the artifact's energy might overload the safeties. Do it, Elara ordered, planting charges as a backup, tangible consequences if they failed. The first blast of enemy fire rattled the rig, hull groaning. Marcus connected the core, blue light flooding the chamber. The reactor sparked to life, hum building to a roar. But then, feedback. The artifact pulsed erratically, nebula storms mirroring its chaos outside. It's rejecting the sync. Marcus yelled, diving to adjust. Lena pulled him back. No, it's adapting. Look. The orb stabilized, energy arcing to the reactor in controlled bursts. Captain Elara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold metal. The stars blurred into streaks outside the viewport as the Ascendant pushed its engines to the limit, weaving through the debris field of what used to be the Orion Nexus. Shards of alien superstructure floated like silent accusations, remnants of the Council's vaunted defense grid, now reduced to glittering confetti by the void storm's fury. "Status, Reyes?" she called over her shoulder, not taking her eyes off the chaos. Ensign Marco Reyes hunched over his console in the adjoining bridge, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Shields at 62%, ma'am. That last pulse nearly fried the emitters. If we hit another wave like that..." He trailed off, fingers flying across the holographic keys. "We won't," Ilara said, her voice steady, the kind of calm that came from too many close calls. She wasn't brave so much as stubborn, humanity's gift or curse depending on the day. "Reroute auxiliary power to the forward arrays. And tell Dr. Lin we're going to need that jury-rigged stabilizer online yesterday." From the engineering bay below, a voice crackled through the intercom, laced with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd rather be elbow-deep in circuits than chatting. "It's online, Captain. But it's a band-aid on a bullet wound. One solid hit and it'll blow us back to the Stone Age." Ilara allowed a tight smile. Dr. Mei Lin was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but her mind turned problems into solutions like water into wine. "Noted. Keep it together down there." The ship shuddered again, a low groan echoing through the hull as another tendril of the void storm lashed out. These weren't your garden-variety solar flares. The storm was a relic of some ancient cataclysm, a swirling maelstrom of quantum disruptions that the Council had dismissed as manageable anomalies. Manageable until it ate their outpost whole. Now, with the Council's fleet scattered and their precious protocols in tatters, it was humanity's unwanted inheritance, racing through the heart of it to deliver the countermeasure they'd cobbled together from scavenged tech and sheer desperation. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Reyes spun in his chair. Incoming debris cluster dead ahead. Evasive maneuvers? Ilara's mind raced, mapping trajectories in her head. The initial plan had been simple. Slip through the storm's outer edge, deploy the probe to seed stabilizing particles, and slip out before the Council's remnants could claim credit, or worse, interference. But the storm had other ideas, shifting patterns like a living thing, forcing them deeper into its maw. "Hard to port," she ordered. The Ascendant banked sharply, inertial dampeners whining in protest. A massive chunk of twisted alloy whipped past, close enough to scrape sparks off the hull. In the aftermath, silence fell, broken only by the hum of straining systems. Then, from the comms, a new voice intruded, smooth, resonant, with the artificial timbre of a Zalari translator. "Human vessel Ascendant, this is Council Arbitrator Vexcor. You are encroaching on restricted space. Power down and prepare for boarding." Ilara's jaw tightened. Vexcor, the Council's self-appointed enforcer, sleek and superior in his crystalline exosuit, broadcasting from a sleek interceptor that had just materialized on their scopes. He'd been hounding them since the Nexus fell, convinced humanity's primitive meddling was the storm's true cause. Reyes hailed them. "Audio only." She straightened, facing the pickup. "Arbitrator, we're in the thick of it here. Storm's worsening, your grid failed, remember? We're the only ones with a shot at stabilizing this mess." A holographic feed flickered to life, Vexcor's multifaceted eyes gleaming with disdain. "Your shot is an affront to protocol. The Council's Ascendance demands order, not reckless improvisation. Cease your efforts or face neutralization." Behind her, Reyes muttered under his breath, "Guy talks like he's reading from a manual." Ilara ignored him, leaning into the tension. "Neutralize us and the storm swallows your precious Council whole. We're not asking permission, we're saving your hides." Vexcor's form shimmered, a ripple of irritation. "Arrogance. The Council chose wisely in denying your species entry. Stand down." The line cut, and moments later targeting locks pinged on their sensors. The interceptor fired a warning shot, a lance of plasma that grazed the Ascendant's flank, buckling a section of outer plating. "They're not bluffing," Lin's voice cut in from below, urgent now. "Hull integrity dropping. We lose another panel and we're venting atmosphere." Ilara's plan, deploy the probe on the next clear vector, crumbled under the assault. The storm's roar intensified as if feeding on the discord, whipping debris into a deadly ballet. She slammed her fist on the console. Evasive pattern delta. Reyes arm countermeasures. Lin, can we boost the stabilizer to cover a counterfire burst? A pause, then Lin's reply laced with grim resolve. Pushing it. But it'll overload in 30 seconds flat. We get one shot. The ship twisted through the maelstrom, dodging plasma volleys while the storm clawed at their shields. Ilera watched Vexcor's vessel close in, its elegant lines cutting through the chaos like a knife. Humanity's grit against alien pride, it was almost poetic if it didn't feel so damn personal. As the interceptor loomed, Ilera made the call. Fire when ready. Ilera gripped the console edge as the Vanguard's bridge shuddered, the hull groaning under another pulse from the nebula's core. Red alerts flickered across the displays, casting jagged shadows on her face. She'd led scavenging runs before, but this anomaly wasn't just a storm, it was alive, twisting quantum fields into snares that drained power from anything that got too close. Her team, down to 3 after the initial breach, had bet everything on threading the eye for rare isotopes. Now, with the engine sputtering, that bet looked like suicide. Captain, we're losing auxiliary power, Jax muttered from engineering's remote feed, his voice crackling over the comms. The wiry mechanic wiped sweat from his brow, tools clattering as he rerouted what little juice remained. Jax was the cautious one, always double-checking seals and running sims twice, but even he had pushed for this dive. Humanity's fringe colonies needed those isotopes. Without them, the fusion plants flickered out, and with them went the fragile peace with the neighboring Krell enclaves. Ilera nodded, though he couldn't see it. Hold it together, Jax. Mira, what's our window? She turned to the navigator, a sharp-eyed woman whose wit had defused more tense standoffs than Ilera's commands. Myra's fingers danced over her panel, plotting vectors against the nebula's chaotic flux. 10 minutes, tops, before the field collapses our shields. But if we adjust for the interference. Mira trailed off, her brow furrowing. The plan had been simple: skim the edge, harvest, evade. But the nebula had shifted, birthing tendrils that lashed out like whips, snagging their drone probes one by one. The first failure hit hours ago, a backfire in the collector array that vented plasma and cost them their backup thrusters. A low rumble built, vibrating through the deck. Ilera's stomach tightened. Incoming pulse. Brace. The ship bucked, lights dimming to emergency glow. Alarms wailed as a structural alert blared, hull integrity at 70%. She could feel the cost mounting, not just the ship but the crew's trust. If they limped back empty-handed, the Council's smug dismissal of human recklessness would echo louder. The aliens had hoarded the isotopes for centuries, doling them out like favors to worthy species. Humanity? Too new, too bold. Arrogance, they'd called it. Jax's voice cut through. Gotta work around, repurposing the grav plates to stabilize the core. But it'll fry them. No more artificial gravity after this. His tone held no complaint, just fact. That was Jax. Steady the glue when plans frayed. Do it, Ilera said, her voice leveled despite the knot in her chest. Mira shot her a glance, eyes gleaming with that mix of fear and fire. And Mira, plot us a slingshot off that tendril. Use its momentum against it. The navigator's laugh was short, edged. Playing chicken with a space kraken? Your funeral, Cap. But her hands moved faster, weaving a path through the holographic storm. The Vanguard lurched as Jax's hack kicked in, the deck tilting wildly without grav compensation. Ilera floated half-strapped in her chair, barking adjustments. The nebula's glow painted the viewport in sickly purples, a single tendril coiling closer, a massive iridescent vein pulsing with stolen energy. Myra's slingshot engaged, the ship whipped around it, engines flaring in defiance. For a heartbeat, they skimmed free, collectors humming as they grazed the isotope cloud. Then the tendrils snapped back, clipping their flank. Sparks erupted from a console, and Mira cursed, wrestling the controls. Direct hit, port side venting. The ship spun, alarms screaming. Ilera's mind raced. They had a partial haul, enough maybe to buy time, but the nebula wasn't done. Deeper pulses built, promising worse. Jax, seal what you can. We're punching out. Ilera unstrapped, pushing toward the damaged panel. Her team wasn't breaking, not yet. But as the stars blurred beyond the chaos, she wondered if the Council's arrogance had blinded them to what humans could endure. Ascension wasn't given, it was carved for moments like this, one desperate fix at a time. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the bridge of the Endeavor, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The ship groaned under the strain of the ion storm, hull plates vibrating as if the vessel itself were holding its breath. Beside her, Engineer Raj Patel hunched over a makeshift diagnostic panel, his fingers flying across the holographic display, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Structural integrity at 60%, Raj muttered, his voice steady but edged with the caution that had kept him alive through a dozen hull breaches. "If we push the engines any harder, we'll shear off the aft stabilizers. Storms whipping up magnetic eddies, it's like flying through a blender." Elena nodded, her dark eyes scanning the viewport where swirling plasma clouds obscured the stars. The alien council's blockade was still out there, their sleek dreadnoughts waiting like patient predators beyond the storm's veil. Humanity's gambit to slip through had relied on this natural cover, but now it was turning against them. "Options?" she asked, keeping her tone even, though her mind raced through the contingencies. Lieutenant Kira Voss, the wiry navigator with a wit sharp as a laser cutter, leaned forward from her station. "We could vent plasma from the auxiliary thrusters, create a false signature to draw their fire away. Risky, but it might buy us time to punch through the outer layer." Her fingers tapped a rhythm on her knee, a habit from the academy days when she'd outmaneuver sim drills with sheer audacity. Raj shot her a glance, his brow furrowing. "And light us up like a flare? No. Better to recalibrate the shields to absorb the ions, turn the storm into our ally. I've got a jury rig on the emitters, it'll hold for maybe 20 minutes. The ship lurched suddenly, a deep rumble echoing from below decks as an eddy slammed into the hull. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing in warning. Elena's heart skipped, but she forced calm into her voice. "Do it. Kira, plot the vector, shallow dive into the densest part. If we can't outrun them, we'll outlast." As Raj initiated the recalibration, sparks erupted from a nearby panel, the acrid smell of ozone filling the air. He cursed under his breath, slamming a fist to override the safeties. "Come on, you stubborn beast," he growled, coaxing the system back online with the grit of someone who'd rebuilt engines from scrap on Mars colonies. Kira's hands blurred over her controls, the holographic starfield twisting as she adjusted their course. "Diving now. Hold on, this is gonna feel like a gut punch." The Endeavor plunged forward, the storm's fury battering them like 1,000 fists. Through the viewport, a massive tendril of plasma lashed out, illuminating the bridge in electric blue. Elena felt the deck tilt, her body pressing against the restraints, but she kept her eyes on the readouts. The shields hummed to life, absorbing the onslaught, converting raw energy into a shimmering barrier that pushed back the chaos. Minutes stretched into eternity, the crew silent save for the ship's protests. Then, a ping from Kira's console cut through the tension. "Clearing the outer edge, Council ships are scattering, their sensors blinded by the feedback." Raj exhaled, slumping back as the vibrations eased. "Shields holding at 80. We made it through the meat grinder." Elena allowed herself a tight smile, unbuckling as the stars stabilized ahead. But the victory was bittersweet. Scans showed the blockade reforming, tighter now, their arrogance unbroken. One engine nacelle was compromised, leaking drive plasma, a trail that would lead pursuers straight to them. "Patch what you can, Raj. Kira, find us a shadow to hide in. This isn't over." In the quiet that followed, the crew moved with renewed purpose, the weight of Ascension pressing heavier on their shoulders. Humanity's path forward demanded more than survival. It required the spark of ingenuity that no council decree could extinguish. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport twisted like molten glass, the warp rift they'd punched through earlier now unraveling behind them. "Status, Reyes," she barked, her voice cutting through the din without a tremor. "Reyes, ever the unflappable engineer, wiped sweat from his brow and tapped furiously at his holographic display. Shields at 30%, ma'am. That council blockade hit us harder than we thought. Their disruptors are bleeding our core dry. In the dim glow of the bridge, Dr. Lyric, the avian diplomat from the fringe worlds, paced with clipped steps, his feathers ruffled in agitation. He'd been the one to warn them about the council's arrogance, the way they dismissed humanity's unorthodox fusion drives as reckless primitives. Now, with their stolen prototype humming at critical levels, Lyric's caution clashed against Alara's grit. "We should jettison the excess payload," he urged, his beak clicking sharply. "The rift's instability will tear us apart if we push further." Alara shot him a glance, her eyes steady, the scar across her cheek pulling tight. "And lose the Ascension Matrix? No. We've come too far to hand it back on a platter." The Matrix was their edge, a human invention blending quantum entanglement with neural uplinks, designed to elevate a species' collective cognition beyond the Council's sterile algorithms. The aliens had laughed it off as folklore, but Alara knew better. She'd seen the simulations, the way it could rewrite realities for entire fleets. Reyes grunted, rerouting power with a series of overrides. Sparks danced from a nearby panel, illuminating the faint tremor in his hands. "Gotta work around, rerouting auxiliary thrusters to stabilize the core. But it'll fry the NAV systems for a good hour." The ship lurched, gravity flickering as the rift's gravitational shears clawed at the hull. Alara braced against the bulkhead, tasting the metallic tang of recycled air. Outside, the Council's pursuit drones swarmed like angry hornets, their laser grids slicing through the debris field they'd left in their wake. Lyric stopped pacing, his taloned feet clicking on the deck. "This is madness, Voss. The Council will brand us traitors. My people will suffer reprisals." But there was a spark in his eye, a reluctant admiration for the human's resolve. Alara met his gaze, her voice low and firm. "Then make it count, Doctor. Help Reyes lock in those coordinates. We're not running, we're ascending." As the engineer initiated the bypass, the ship groaned, metal protesting under the strain. The viewport filled with the rift's eerie blue maw, a vortex promising either breakthrough or oblivion. Alara's mind raced through contingencies, evasive patterns, decoy flares, but deep down she felt the pull of the Matrix's promise. Not just survival but evolution. The alarms peaked, then silenced as Reyes slammed the final command. Holding, barely. The stars blurred into streaks, and for a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, the first feedback loop from the Matrix hummed to life, threading through the ship's systems like a living vein. Alara exhaled, the weight of command settling heavier. They were through, but the Council's shadow loomed. The Real test waited on the other side. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Lena's face as she hunched over the makeshift interface, her fingers dancing across the holographic keys. Sweat beaded on her forehead, mixing with the grime of days without rest. Around her, the remnants of the bridge hummed with a fragile energy, sparks from overloaded circuits occasionally popping like distant gunfire. Captain Reyes stood at the viewport, his broad shoulders tense, staring into the void where the Arcturian fleet loomed like shadowed monoliths against the nebulous swirl. "Status on the Cascade Modulator?" Reyes asked, his voice steady but edged with the gravel of exhaustion. He didn't turn, trusting Lena's report to cut through the tension like a knife. "Patched, but it's holding by a thread," she replied, not looking up. Her witty edge had dulled hours ago, replaced by the raw focus of someone who jury-rigged half the ship's systems from scrap. "The alloy we scavenged from the derelict works, better than their vaunted crystal matrices actually. But if we push the engines another jump, it'll shear right off." Kale, the Thrixian engineer they'd press-ganged into alliance after his clan's betrayal, shifted uneasily in the corner. His iridescent scales caught the light, rippling with suppressed anxiety. "Human stubbornness will be your undoing," he muttered, his multifaceted eyes darting to the sensors. "The Council's blockade is tightening. They've deployed the null field emitters, any warp signature, and we're ghosts in the machine." Reyes finally turned, his dark eyes locking onto Kale with that unyielding human grit. "Stubbornness got us this far. Your people chose arrogance, sealing off the Ascension gates because we lesser species dared innovate beyond their edicts. Now look, your fleet's choking on its own pride while we adapt. Lena snorted softly, soldering a final connection with a tool that was more improvisation than instrument. The ship groaned as another tremor ran through the hull, the nullfield's interference clawing at their shields. She remembered the Council's broadcast across the stars. Humanity barred from the gates, deemed too reckless for the galaxy's shared evolution. But Reyes had seen it differently, not as a barrier but a challenge. They'd stolen a gate key from a corrupt envoy, rallied misfits like Kale, and plunged into the nebula's heart, where the ancient Ascension tech lay hidden. A sharp alarm blared, red lights bathing the bridge in crimson. "Incoming salvo," Kale hissed, his claws clicking against the panel as he routed power. "Dreadnoughts flanking, 3 minutes to impact." Reyes nodded, moving to Lena's side. "We go manual. Override the auto NAV, plot a slingshot through the nebula's gravity wells. Use the debris field for cover." Lena's hands paused, then flew into action. "Risky. The wells could tear us apart if the timing's off by a hair." "Better than surrender," Reyes said, his tone leaving no room for debate. He clapped a hand on her shoulder, the camaraderie a silent anchor in the storm. Kale hesitated, then joined them, his reluctance melting into reluctant respect. For the first time, the Thrixian didn't argue, humanity's relentless drive had worn through his doubts. The ship lurched as they engaged the overrides. Alarms wailed, but Lena's calculations held, weaving them through a gauntlet of twisting plasma streams. Explosions bloomed outside, Arcturian fire glancing off improvised shields. One well pulled them perilously close to a shattered moonlet, the hull screaming in protest, but they emerged on the far side, the fleet's formation fracturing in confusion. "Gate signature ahead," Kale announced, his voice laced with awe. The Ascension portal shimmered into view, a vortex of ethereal light defying the nebula's chaos. But as they approached, a final dreadnought broke through, its weapons charging with a malevolent hum. Reyes gripped the controls. "Lena, vent the auxiliary plasma. Make it look like we're venting core. Draw them in." She complied, fingers blurring. The ship shuddered, spewing a deceptive plume that mimicked a death throw. The dreadnought dove, overconfident, straight into the gravity well's maw. A brilliant flash erupted as it crumpled, pulled inexorably into oblivion. They hurtled toward the gate, the portal's energy washing over them like a tidal wave. But victory came at a cost. The modulator shattered in a cascade of sparks, leaving the ship adrift on the threshold. Reyes exhaled, watching the stars warp. "We made it. But the real test starts now." Lena leaned back, a faint smile cracking her fatigue. The Council's arrogance had blinded them, but humanity's ascension? That was forged in fire, unyielding. Elena gripped the armrests of the command chair, her knuckles whitening as the Ascendant's bridge shuddered under another barrage. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, red lights painting the faces of her crew in harsh relief. Marcus hunched over the engineering console, his fingers flying across holographic displays, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Shields at 20%, he reported, voice steady but edged with strain. "That last hit clipped the auxiliary generators. We're bleeding power like a sieve." She nodded, eyes locked on the view screen where the Vexary dreadnought loomed, its crystalline hull fracturing the starlight into jagged rainbows. The Council had branded humanity's ascension bid as reckless hubris, sealing the quantum gate with their blockade. But Elena's team had slipped through the outer perimeter hours ago, only to run headlong into this enforcer. Arrogance, they called it. To her, it was survival, humanity's grit against an empire that feared what they couldn't control. "Divert everything to forward arrays," she said, leaning forward. "And get me a firing solution on their weapon ports. If we can't outrun them, we'll outsmart them." Marcus glanced up, his cautious nature flickering in his eyes before he submerged it in action. "That's suicide." "Their armor's adaptive." A jolt rocked the ship, cutting him off. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, and the lights dimmed to emergency glow. Elena tasted blood where she'd bitten her lip. The Vexary weren't just firing. They were dissecting the Ascendant, probe by probe, as if cataloging humanity's final mistake. In the comm station, Lila patched through a fragmented signal. The young navigator, all sharp wit and unyielding optimism, masked her fear with a grin. Incoming hail from the dreadnought. They're offering surrender terms. Again. Want me to play it? Elena snorted, the sound more defiant than amused. Patch it here. Let's hear their magnanimity. The view screen split, revealing the Vexery commander, a towering figure of iridescent scales and multifaceted eyes that seemed to pierce through the bulkheads. Its voice hummed like vibrating crystal. Primitive vessel, your persistence is noted but futile. The Council's decree stands. Revert course or we will reduce you to debris. Your species' ingenuity ends here. Lila muted the feed before Elena could respond, her fingers hovering. They're stalling. Sensors show their flank engines overheating, must be the nebula's interference. Elena's mind raced, piecing fragments. The nebula, a swirling maelstrom of ionized gas and gravitational eddies, had been their gamble, a shortcut to the Ascension Nexus, where humanity could claim the evolutionary leap the Council hoarded. But it amplified the Vexery's sensors while scrambling human tech. Unless... Marcus, she said, snapping her fingers. Can we modulate the deflector shields to pulse like a Vexery signature? Make us look like one of their scouts. He paused, brow furrowing, then his eyes lit. Risky. It'd overload the grid in minutes, but... yeah. If we time it right, we could slip past while they recalibrate. The ship groaned as another volley grazed them, hull plating buckling somewhere below. Elena felt the vibration in her bones. Real cost. If this failed, the Ascendant would be scrap, and with it humanity shot at equality among the stars. No lone heroics, just her crew betting everything on a human trick. Do it, she ordered. Lila, plot an intercept course through the densest gas cloud. Full burn. As Marcus initiated the sequence, the bridge filled with the whine of straining systems. The view screen blurred with nebular haze, purple tendrils coiling like living smoke. Elena watched the Vexery ship falter, its weapons pausing as confusion rippled through their formation. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the hum of the engines. Then Lila whooped softly. They're breaking off, chasing ghosts. Elena allowed herself a breath, but her gaze lingered on the fading dreadnought. The Nexus waited beyond, a shimmering rift promising ascension. Yet the nebulous toll mounted, sensor ghosts, power flickers, and the gnawing doubt that one wrong pulse could doom them all. They were close, but the Council's arrogance had teeth, and humanity's path was paved with scars. The hum of the engines thrummed through the deck like a heartbeat, steady now after the chaos of the breach. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the command rail, her knuckles white, as the view screen bloomed with the nebulous swirling gases, iridescent blues and violets that masked the Armada's approach. Behind her Dr. Kai Rin hunched over the auxiliary console, his fingers dancing across holographic readouts, sweat beading on his brow despite the recycled air's chill. Lieutenant Mira Singh stood at her station, rifle slung across her chest, her eyes sharp and unyielding, the scar on her cheek a faint reminder of the boarding skirmish they'd barely survived. We've got incoming signatures, Mira said, her voice clipped, no room for doubt. 3 cruisers closing fast. Council's enforcers, they're not bluffing this time. Ilara nodded, tasting the metallic tang of recycled oxygen. The plan had been desperate from the start. Jury-rigged the Odyssey's warp core with salvaged Xenotech, punched through the blockade, and reached the Ascension Nexus before the galaxy's self-appointed guardians could seal it off. Humanity's bid for transcendence, born from scraps and sheer will, had drawn their wrath. The Council, those ancient, crystalline overlords, saw Ascension as their monopoly, a prize for the evolved, not the scrappy upstarts from Sol. But Ilara's crew had proven them wrong at every turn, turning traps into triumphs with human grit and a dash of madness. Kai straightened, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. The modifications are holding. We've inverted the phase coils, should give us a 15-second window to slip the net. But if they fire first... He trailed off, the implication hanging like smoke. Then we make them regret it, Ilara replied, her tone even, the brave core of her pushing through the knot in her gut. She'd led mining ops on Titan, stared down storms that swallowed ships whole. This was just another frontier. Mira, target their lead ship's disruptors. Kai, sync the shields to the nebula's interference pattern. We danced through the fire. Alarms blared as the first volley lit the void, crimson lances slicing toward them. Myra's shots rang out in precise bursts, her aim a product of endless drills and that unshakable focus, witty in downtime, lethal now. One disruptor array sparked and died on the enemy hull, buying them seconds. The Odyssey shuddered, inertial dampeners straining as Kai's hack fed false echoes into the nebula, making their ship a ghost among the clouds. Ilara's mind raced, piecing together the final gambit. The Council's arrogance had blinded them. They relied on overwhelming force, predictable algorithms. Humans? They adapted, layered plans within plans. Now Kai, initiate the cascade. He punched the command and the warp core whined, reality folding around them like wet clay. The view screen warped, stars stretching into rivers of light. The Enforcer's fire grazed their hull, shearing off a sensor array in a burst of sparks, but they were through, hurtling toward the Nexus, a colossal ring of shimmering energy suspended in the nebula's heart. As the ship stabilized, Ilara allowed herself a breath. The Nexus loomed, its arches pulsing with invitation, the key to ascension, not godhood but unity with the cosmos, a leap humanity had earned through trial. But the cost lingered, the Odyssey limped, half her crew gone, alliances shattered. The Council would hunt them, their hubris cracked but not broken. Mira holstered her rifle, a rare grin cracking her facade. We did it, Cap, humanity's in the door. Kai laughed, shaky but genuine. And they thought we'd fold. Ilara turned from the screen, the nebula's glow casting long shadows. Ascension awaited, but so did the stars beyond, vast, unforgiving, calling for more ingenuity, more fight. They'd chosen the hard path, and in that choice they'd risen.